I'm very happy to be with you, and thank you, Father Bob Wright, for inviting me to come to this symposium. I regret not being able to be there with you physically, and appreciate the fact that you are open to this video that I am making with the help of a very good and expert friend. I am. I've had the privilege of working closely with Cesar Chavez. I got to know him mostly through my work with the Padres organization in the early 70s. Not long after the talk of Reverend Hartmeyer, Chris Hartmeyer, in Santa Barbara, I got an invitation to go to San Jose, California. I'd been taking flying lessons at the time and did not fly up on my own, but went with one of my teachers who flew me and a friend to this meeting, during which Cesar talked to priests. We were his only audience. The meeting was chaired by Reverend Alan McCoy, who at the time was the provincial for the Franciscan Fathers of the province of California. Cesar talked about the farm workers being mostly Catholic, Filipino and Mexican. He also mentioned that the growers, a large portion, were Catholic, Portuguese and other nationalities. Not all, of course, but a good number. He also put on the line that many of his supporters were religious folk, Protestant clergy and churches who had made statements of support, and Jewish rabbis and their constituencies, judicatories and synagogues, were supportive. Bishops had not really made any firm commitments to the farm workers at the time, nor had priests in any significant way. So his question to us, and a challenge to me personally, are, where are my priests? It felt a little bit like a spanking by an uncle or a father or a brother even, and I took it to heart, and after that began to be more specifically engaged with the farm worker movement in my parish ministry. Bishop Flores was ordained a bishop on Cinco de Mayo 1970. He had worked as a young priest in the Cursillo movement and the marriage encounter in the Houston diocese to which he belonged. One of the first shouts of the fledgling Padres organization was for leadership development and a Chicano bishop. It so happened that among those 25 or so who met at their national meeting in Tucson was Bishop Patrick Flores. A few months later, in Cinco de Mayo, he was ordained at the Spurs basketball stadium. Very lively liturgy, beautiful, a kind of battle of the mariachi bands. And one of the things that intrigued me was the one who proclaimed the epistle, the reading, was Cesar Chavez. It was only recently that I discovered that Cesar had taken the Cursillo with some of his lieutenants and own leaders in the Houston diocese, where Father Patrick Flores was giving the rollos. He was the rector, is what they call it. And I was given by Dr. Timothy Matavina, professor at Notre Dame, a copy of the notes that Cesar had written from the rollos, the talks that Father Flores gave at that Cursillo. It's no accident that the Cursillo theme song, De Colores, is also the anthem for the farm worker movement. Before I went to San Antonio, I accompanied Bishop Flores to Bishop Flores came to the San Bernardino area to celebrate a Mass in honor of Our Lady of Guadalupe. It was in early December, not yet for the Feast of Guadalupe, but by this time Cesar was in jail in the San Jose area, Northern California, and we arranged to go to the place where he was imprisoned, and Bishop Flores went to visit him. That was a major coup, and it came out in a national publication of the National Catholic Reporter, and it made the Christmas issue, which made for good reading. Newly in the job of Padres, I had the liberty to visit Cesar directly as he was recuperating from a fast. It was not quite as long as the fast as his first one. The first one was to counter the temptation to violence that many of his farm workers were exhibiting and feeling and experiencing. And Cesar wanted to remind them of the importance of nonviolence. The second fast in Arizona, at which I visited Cesar, and this time I met him personally, was to bring attention to an anti-discriminatory or discriminatory law against the farm workers that would impede their organizing efforts. And the fast was successful, and the vote was overcome of that piece of legislation that would have been adverse against the farm workers. I got a call from Chris Hartmeyer, who said, "Come to Fresno and bring some other people with you." I called a priest friend of mine who was at the parish where I was first assigned in St. Alphonsus in East LA, and he had the flexibility to accompany me. We drove to Fresno, stayed overnight at the cathedral in Fresno with a member of the Padres organization, and the next morning we went early in the morning to Parlier Park. Chris Hartmeyer met me there and asked me to be the MC for a rally. Cesar was going to come soon. I remember Cesar's talk, very strong, very poignant, and it was a challenge to his listeners, not only farm workers, but many sympathizers. He was saying, how are your children going to remember you, your grandchildren, when they ask, what did you do at this time, etc. So it was a motivational talk. Then the invitation of Chris Hartmeyer, of those who wanted to go to the picket line, was to give our car keys to him, and we would carpool to the position where the picket line was. The car in which I got given my car keys to was interesting because one of the riders in this small car was Dorothy Day, New York socialite, who had been converted to the cause of the Communist Party, and from there she flipped to a very saintly Catholic laywoman who had houses of hospitality, feeding the poor and the hungry, and had sassafras tea and talks for those who were interested in her New York houses of hospitality and others that sprang up. I had visited Dorothy, met her in the past, heard her speak, and as a young boy, remember sending out our newspaper at our parish church, her newspaper called The Catholic Worker. I was intrigued by that newspaper, of how different it was from our diocesan paper of the Tidings and the Sunday Visitor. I was so happy to meet Dorothy at such close quarters, and she quipped, the first time I was in jail, I was the youngest, and now I'm the oldest. There's a well-known photograph of her at the picket line, taken between the legs of a member of the sheriff department. Dorothy, now an elderly lady in her 80s at least, was sitting down at a chair, and she had a book on her lap. I know for a fact because I heard her. The book was the New Testament, and she was reading aloud Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for justice. It was a beautiful moment and a beautiful encounter. She went to jail with the rest of us, the women and the men. One side note, the priest friend that I took with me was Raul Luna, we called him. He was a Salesian priest. We were stuffed the jails. There were several hundred farm workers and clergy total, people in the jails. Now, we were jailed by alphabetical order. So Luna, being higher up on the alphabet, was in the real jail. By the time they got to Romero, I was put in a very nice facility, a youth center. We could go outside. We had air conditioning. Could even watch television. And my poor friend Raul Luna was in a hot, sweaty jail cell for real. But one of the things we had in common together with the other hundreds of people who stuffed the jails was our commitment to pray and fast. It was a holy time, one that even to this day brings tears to my eyes as I remember the solidarity of the people who were hungry and thirsty, because we had every day for 2 weeks a vitamin C pill and water, even as the sheriff members brought dutifully nice big meals for us to eat. We celebrated Mass there and had visitors, and I had a number of phone calls and visitors at my lush youth center, while I'm sure Raul Luna had nothing. But anyway, it was a holy time for me, and I remember it poignantly and well.